Good evening, and welcome to episode 1 of Unsolved History Mysteries. Tonight, our journey takes us not to a place of grand palaces or epic battles, but to a city of whispers and shadows. We'll drift back to the foggy, gaslit streets of Victorian London, a place of extraordinary progress and profound hidden struggles. Settle down now, find a comfortable position, and let your body grow heavy and still. Let the world outside your room gently fade as your attention softens and settles on the quiet sound of my voice. In the autumn of 1888, a terror emerged from the deepest of shadows. A phantom who stalked the impoverished alleyways and who would come to haunt history itself. A ghost without a name. Who was this man? Why did he commit such terrible acts? And how did he vanish, as if into the very fog from which he came? Before we wander together into the cobbled alleyways of our story, if you enjoyed this calm journey into the past, a quiet click on the subscribe button is a small kindness that helps us bring more tales like this one to you. Now, let your mind drift and let the story begin. Chapter 1. The World of Whitechapel. Our story begins in the heart of London's East End, in a district known as Whitechapel. The year is 1888. Imagine, for a moment, the air itself. It hangs thick and heavy, coal smoke from 1,000 chimneys, the damp breath of the nearby River Thames, the pungent bite of tanneries and slaughterhouses. The streets are a labyrinth of narrow, winding alleyways, unpaved and slick with mud and refuse. By night, the darkness is near absolute, broken only by the intermittent flickering glow of gas lamps that cast long, dancing shadows and leave deep pools of blackness between them, a disorienting world where anything or anyone could be concealed. Life here is a relentless, daily struggle for survival. Buildings meant for a single family are subdivided again and again, till entire families, sometimes strangers, are crammed into a single, squalid room. For the poorest souls, common lodging houses offered a bed for the night for a few pence. Some were so destitute they could only afford the twopenny hangover, a rope stretched across a room against which they could lean to sleep. It was a world of transient souls, living hand to mouth, with nothing to catch them if they fell. This immense poverty was deepened by waves of immigration, Irish families fleeing famine, Jewish refugees escaping persecution in Eastern Europe, all arriving with little more than the clothes on their backs. Work was grueling and insecure, found in the sweated trades or at the docks. For many women with few other options, prostitution was the only way to earn a few pence for a meal or a bed. It is estimated that over 1,000 women walked the streets of Whitechapel in 1888, not by choice, but out of desperate necessity, a community living perpetually on the edge. It is into this world of deep shadow and hidden struggle that our mystery now, quietly and dreadfully, steps. Let your breathing be slow and even. You are safe and warm, and this is only a story from a long, distant past. Chapter 2. The First Victim. On the night of August 30th, 1888, a 43-year-old woman named Mary Ann Nichols, known to friends simply as Polly, was trying to earn the fourpence she needed for a bed. Her life had grown hard. Separated from her husband and 5 children, she cycled between workhouses and lodging houses. That evening, she was turned out, unable to pay. Unconcerned, she pointed to her new black bonnet, a small, proud touch in a difficult life, and told the lodging house deputy, "I'll soon get my DOS money. See what a jolly bonnet I've got now." She walked off alone into the gloom. It was the last time anyone who knew her saw her alive. At around 3:40 in the morning, a car driver named Charles Cross was walking to work down a dark, narrow street called Buck's Row. In the shadow of a gloomy gateway, he noticed a shape on the ground. Thinking the woman was drunk and unconscious, he gently pulled her skirt down for modesty and went on his way. Minutes later, Police Constable John Neal arrived. He brought his lantern close. Its pale light fell upon something terrible. The woman's throat had been deeply and violently cut. Twice, Her body was still warm. The killer had struck only moments before and had melted back into the labyrinthine darkness of Whitechapel. The press would later call it the beginning of the Autumn of Terror. Chapter 3. The second victim. Just 8 days later, on the morning of September 8th, the phantom struck again. Annie Chapman was 47 years old and, like Polly Nichols, had watched a comfortable life unravel into hardship. That morning, she too was short of her lodging money. Feeling unwell, she went out into the cold, pre-dawn darkness to find a client. At just before 6 in the morning, a resident of 29 Hanbury Street, a tall old brick townhouse packed with lodgers, stepped into the shared backyard and stopped in horror. There, between the stone steps and the wooden fence, lay Annie Chapman. The attack was far more savage than the first. Her throat was cut so deeply that her head was nearly severed. Her abdomen had been opened, her intestines cast aside. The police surgeon who examined her later noted that her uterus had been carefully, skillfully removed and taken by the killer. The precision of the cuts implied a chilling degree of anatomical knowledge, all accomplished in the dim, early morning light of a residential yard. A cold panic began to grip the East End. The press sensationalized the killings, and a name began circulating in whispers: Leather Apron. But this was only the beginning. Let your body remain heavy and still. You are far, far from those foggy streets tonight. Chapter 4. The Letters and a Name. As the city held its breath, police had no leads. Then, on September 27th, a letter arrived at the Central News Agency in London. Written in red ink, it carried a taunting, boastful tone. Dear boss, it began. I keep on hearing the police have caught me, but they won't fix me just yet. I am down on whores, and I shan't quit ripping them till I do get buckled. I love my work and want to start again. The author promised to clip the ears off his next victim and send them to police, just for jolly. At the bottom, he signed a name that would burn itself into history, a name that would become the world's most infamous synonym for anonymous terror. Yours truly, Jack the Ripper. Police initially dismissed it as a cruel hoax, one of many flooding their offices. But events, just 3 days later, would give the author's words a terrifying, seemingly authentic weight. To Chapter 5. The Double Event. The night of September 30th was dark, damp, and unsettled. In the early hours of that Sunday morning, the phantom embarked on its most audacious act of violence, an episode remembered as the Double Event. At around 1 o'clock in the morning, the body of Elizabeth Stride was found in a dark passage called Dutfield's Yard. Her throat had been cut. There were no other mutilations. The doctor believed the killer had been interrupted, startled away before he could continue. A vendor named Louis Dimshots had entered the yard with his pony and cart, and the pony had shied away from the shape in the dark. It is thought this sudden arrival sent the killer fleeing into the night. But his night was not over. Less than an hour later, scarcely a mile away, a constable patrolling a quiet corner of the city of London, known as Mitre Square, found the body of Catherine Eddowes. This time, the killer had not been interrupted. Her throat was cut, her face deeply disfigured, her abdomen torn open. Her left kidney and a portion of her uterus had been removed and taken. And chillingly, one earlobe had been partially severed, echoing the promise made in the Dear Boss letter. A postcard signed Saucy Jackie arrived the following day, boasting of the double event. The name Jack the Ripper was now seared into the public consciousness. Weeks later, the story took an even darker turn when a small package arrived for George Lusk, the head of a local Citizens Watch. Inside was half of a preserved human kidney, accompanied by a note where the writer claimed to have fried and eaten the other half. Chapter 6. The Final Victim. The Autumn of Terror reached its terrible climax on the morning of November 9th, 1888. The final canonical victim was a young woman named Mary Jane Kelly. just 25 years old, the youngest of the five. Like the others, who were killed in the open streets, Mary was murdered indoors. She had her own small room, number 13, Miller's Court, a sparse, modest space tucked at the end of a dark and narrow alley. This seclusion gave the killer something he had never had before: time. When Mary's landlord sent his assistant, Thomas Boyer, to collect overdue rent, there was no answer at the door. Boyer walked to the window, where a pane of glass was broken. He pushed aside the coat used as a curtain and peered into the dim room. What he saw sent him running, pale and trembling, for the police. What officers found inside was described by those who witnessed it as beyond comprehension. Mary Jane Kelly was later identified by her ex-lover only by her eyes and her hair. Her heart had been taken from the scene entirely. After this final, terrible act, the murders simply stopped. The phantom who had held London in terror for 10 weeks vanished as suddenly and as silently as he had come. Let the quiet of your room settle around you now. This is all distant history, the echo of another world, another time. Chapter 7. The Investigation. The hunt for Jack the Ripper was the largest police investigation of its era. It was led by Chief Inspector Frederick Aberline of Scotland Yard, a 45-year-old, quietly meticulous detective who had spent 14 years working the streets of Whitechapel and knew its rhythms intimately. He was described by those who worked alongside him as looking rather more like a bank manager than a detective. He and his team faced a nearly impossible task. The very concept of a serial killer did not yet exist in the public or police imagination. Forensic science was in its infancy. No fingerprinting, no blood typing, no DNA analysis. Police work meant witness statements, informants, and miles of shoe-leather detective work. Thousands of people were interviewed, hundreds of statements taken, but witness accounts were few, fleeting, and often contradictory. Making matters worse, the press published every lurid detail, and over 1,000 hoax letters poured into police offices, each one demanding precious time and attention. They were hunting a shadow in a city of shadows. Chapter 8. The suspects with no arrest ever made. Speculation has raged for more than 130 years. Over time, a handful of suspects have risen above the rest. Montague John Druitt was a 31-year-old barrister and schoolmaster from a respectable background. Shortly after the final murder, he was dismissed from his position for reasons that were never recorded. He vanished, and on the last day of 1888, his body was pulled from the River Thames, an apparent suicide. The timing was deeply suspicious. Senior investigator Sir Melville Macnaghten noted that Druitt's own family reportedly believed him to be responsible, yet no hard evidence has ever placed him at a single crime scene. Aaron Kosminski was a Polish Jewish immigrant working as a hairdresser in the heart of Whitechapel. He suffered from severe mental illness, harbored a paranoid hostility toward women, and was committed to an asylum in 1891. Senior police officials considered him a strong suspect, but the evidence remained too thin to ever bring him to trial. Inspector Aberline himself favored George Chapman, born Søren Kalasowski, a Polish immigrant with some medical knowledge who lived in Whitechapel during the murders and was later convicted and hanged for poisoning 3 of his wives. Aberline's suspicion was noted, though Chapman's method, slow, deliberate poisoning, could scarcely be more different from the Ripper's savage, frenzied attacks. And then there's the most improbable theory of all, that the killer was Prince Albert, the Duke of Clarence, Queen Victoria's own grandson. The diary suggests a grand royal conspiracy, with evidence buried at the highest levels of government. Historians, however, have found it difficult to sustain. Verified records place the prince well outside London at the time of multiple murders. It is a compelling story, but the evidence does not hold. Chapter 9. The Enduring Mystery. More than 130 years on, the desire to finally name Jack the Ripper has never faded. In 2014, an author who had purchased a silk shawl allegedly found near the body of Catherine. Tito's claimed that mitochondrial DNA analysis linked stains on the fabric to a living descendant of Edo's and a living descendant of Aaron Kosminski. The world took notice. Headlines declared the case solved at last, but the scientific community pushed back firmly. Critics raised serious questions about the shawl's chain of custody. There is no official police record of it being collected at the scene, along with concerns about contamination after more than a century and alleged errors in the interpretation of the genetic data. The case, it seems, remains open. Perhaps that is precisely why the mystery endures. The story has all the qualities of a dark, real-life folktale. The swirling fog, the lonely gaslight, the silent and shadowy figure who comes and goes like smoke. The blank space where his face should be allows every generation to project its own anxieties upon him. He became the prototype for the modern serial killer, a symbol of the darkness that can exist just beneath the surface of an ordered society. And so, the trail goes cold. After that terrible final night in Miller's Court, the killings ceased. Jack the Ripper disappeared. Did he take his own life? Like Montague Druitt, is he quietly committed to an asylum? Like Kosminski, did he sail to another country? Or was he locked away for some lesser crime? We will almost certainly never know. He remains a question mark, a phantom suspended in the foggy air of a Victorian autumn. Inspector Frederick Aberline retired in 1892, never having closed his most famous case. The 5 women, Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Edos, Mary Jane Kelly, rest in graves, long settled by time, their lives cut short. It's the full truth of their final hours, locked away forever. As the gas lamps dim on our story tonight, let the fog of old Whitechapel drift softly around you, not with fear, but with the quiet, distant calm of a mystery that belongs entirely to another world. The questions have no answers tonight, and that is all right. Let them go. Let them dissolve like smoke, curling up into the dark. All that remains now is the slow, steady rhythm of your own breathing, the warmth of wherever you are resting, station to close your eyes.